Our guest this episode, who we are delighted to welcome to the Fair Fight Initiative podcast, is Desmond Meade, one of the top 100 most influential people, a MacArthur Genius Fellow, and of course led the successful effort through Amendment 4 in Florida to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated people. A formerly incarcerated person himself, he now has a law degree, and he leads the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition.
Mr. Desmond Meade, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today with us. I so appreciate you taking time out of what is a busy agenda that you have to speak to the people today here on the Fair Fight Initiative podcast. I'm a fan. I'm just a fan. I was looking back at some of the footage that they have of you, just kind of getting myself ready to speak to you. And there was one clip of you when you were helping the gentleman to vote and they rejected him. And just the passion and the emotion that you felt, and sometimes what I thought in myself, I said, look how strong you are. Look at what a warrior you are in our village for our people. And I was just so overwhelmingly proud of the Black man that you are, I thought about my brother and I thought about my husband and all of you guys in this society. And a lot of times they just use you as a battering ram for everything that they want to get across.
No, I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. And I remember that video you're referencing, and I'm gonna tell you, I really didn't feel strong in that moment, but as you was talking and I was thinking about it, I guess, there's a different way of looking at, strength, right? And so, while you were talking, what came to mind was that our strength really shows up in moments of weakness, right?
Yes.
There is that need for that. Just like, they talk about with courage, when you have people saying, well, I ain't scared of nothing, whatever, and to me, I felt like, really, come on, get out of here. Because at the end of the day, courage, the necessary element for courage is fear. Amen. Right? And if you don't have fear, that means that you're reckless, right?
Come on. Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with fear. And, and I say that because going back to what you said, sometimes folks don't want to think that they're weak, right? But there's nothing wrong with weakness. It's not a bad thing. We're not strong in everything. But our strength can show up in those moments of weakness. And so we embrace those moments of weakness because it gives us an opportunity to go stronger. And so I appreciate what you said.
I love that too. That I always like to say that people who are feeling weakness tend to be giving off signs of strength, right? Yeah. And it's a real sign of strength to show vulnerability.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I couldn't agree more with you. And I think it is the perfect sort of preface for what we want to talk to you about today. I think we want to preface this by saying, if you don't know who Desmond Meade is by this point, go buy his memoir, because we're not going to rehash it here. We'd love to rehash it here, but we got to talk about what's next. And we need some marching orders, and we need to change tactics, and we need to know how to combat what's happening on the ground right now. And I mean, there's news here too. I mean, there's some good news about Senate Bill 90, right? That's Florida's voter suppression bill that got held up. You want to update us there first?
Yeah, well, the I believe it was in the Northern District of Florida. Federal Judge Walker issued a blistering opinion on SB 90. And it's really like throwing a monkey wrench in our legislators' plan to really minimize involvement. A lot of folks use voter suppression. But let me tell you what I think part of when you talk about tactics and approaches, one thing I learned today, if we don't change how we look at things, the way we see things never change.
Right? Come on now.
And so, voter suppression, that's a very popular term or term of art. But, I think it's much deeper than that, right? And I think that we cannot limit what's really happening and limit who's actually doing it to us, right? Because when we strip away all the veneers, what we basically see is that since the formation of this country, there have been people who want to pick and choose who get to make the decisions or decide who leads us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in so many different ways, from wanting it only to be landowners, and then didn't want. I mean, it's only recently that women was able to get the right to vote.
Mhm.
And think about
Yeah.
it, women were actually brutalized, right, beaten down on the street and thrown in jails, right, all because they wanted the right to vote. And there were people that did not want women or didn't feel that women should be a part of the group of people that get to pick and choose. And so that's, I think, it's the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
That people who want to pick and choose who get to vote for them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the other part is that we cannot limit it to one particular party over the other. While one party might be more dominant or in the news or whatever about, these tactics, we have to realize that when we look at the history of our country, right? What we see is that this is happening on both sides. Even today, you have, a part of the spotlight. Part of the things that exposed when the spotlight is on Florida is our governor's attempt to really redraw the maps
Mhm.
to
Right.
gain more seats for the Republican Party. All right, and there's a huge outcry about that, right? But at the same time, in blue states, the exact same thing is happening.
Thing is
Right?
happening. That's right.
But there's no outcry about that, right? And so when you have two sides that are doing the same thing, but you're only complaining about one side, then it takes away the legitimacy of your argument or the sincerity of your argument if you're really fighting for more inclusive democracy for everyone. Then you have to be even killed, and you have to be able to call out both sides. And
Mm-hmm.
call out both the best way to call out both sides is to really take a more holistic approach, right? And to go deeper than just a tactic, because there's various tactics. Some use gerrymandering, some use felon disenfranchisement, some uses open or closed primaries, depending on who you talk to. There are
Mm-hmm.
all these different tactics that are being used. And so what I look at is that what we're looking at more than anything is an attack against democracy,
Yeah.
right? The
Right.
democracy that we would want us to have in this country. And there's so many ways that folks are attacking, and these uh, folks that are doing it are primarily politicians, and some is driven through self-interest, and some is driven through the interest of the people who are backing, or supporting them. And so, um, I think that being able to really broaden our argument and create a bigger tent that hold people accountable will allow us, and this is the beautiful part, would allow us the ability to broaden our tent to bring in more people in our efforts to combat against it, right? Because if you're saying, "Oh, these Republicans are doing this, Republicans are doing this," then you're not bringing in too many independents. You're not bringing in too many Republicans who believe in
Mm-hmm.
democracy, just like you do, right?
That's right. That's right.
There are people who have different political opinions, but believe in the same fundamentals that we do. But if we're only attacking their folks and not really holding both sides accountable, then we lose out on the opportunity to engage with those people,
Yeah.
right? To actually grow the movement and actually bring about change.
Yeah, Linda talks about this, and Linda, I want you to tee it up because you have to do the same thing with jail guards inside a facility you want to close,
Yeah.
and there's a legitimacy there that, like you said, Desmond, evaporates immediately, right, Linda?
Exactly. And when we talk about that inclusivity, right? When I got into, criminal justice reform after the death of my son back in 2015, I realized quite quickly that we had to be comprehensive in our approach. Just what you're talking about, that it wasn't about attacking what the problem was or attacking who we felt was our enemy or in this space, but trying to broaden that conversation into how do we bring more people into this conversation so they can see their commonalities with each other, right?
Yeah.
Because if we just make it a black and white thing, if we just make it a Republican Democratic thing, then we're going to lose, which really I think is the majority of the populace, of those people that fall on both of those lines, that are in that juicy part in the middle, right?
Yep.
Like Dave talks about, the corrections officer who is literally really just trying to take care of his
Yep.
family and has
And
to work in this situation, right? So if I demonize him,
yeah,
then I take his humanity away to
yeah,
even show how he really wants to work in a place where he can be
yeah.
proud of. He
And
really wants. Go ahead, Desmond. Go ahead.
and you minimize everyone else's perspective. One
Exactly.
of the things that I always say is that, I don't have a monopoly on the pain and suffering, right? And I darn sure don't have a monopoly on the solutions, right? And so many times we come up with these great ideas, and they could be great ideas of how to fix things. But when we just totally disregard other people's perspective on how this thing could be fixed, right? Then they disengage, right? And they end up becoming opponents, right?
Yeah.
And if we could actually have those conversations and look at the other side, because a lot of times recovery has taught me that you have got to put yourself in someone else's position, right?
Hmm.
And the minute you do so, you it's a shift in how you're engaging with them, how you're approaching the issue. But if we're in a vacuum, you know, it's just going to be your reality versus another person's reality, and you're going to get frustrated because you're like, "How in the hell could they even believe
Can
that?
you even
Why in
not
the hell could
know?
they do
Right.
that?" Yeah, and you
you
get
know?
frustrated and angry, and then you're attacking them, and you're attacking. You could possibly be attacking a person that's real good, but
Yeah.
because you haven't had a conversation with them,
And
or
strategically, if you're trying to accomplish something, it makes no sense, right? That you're going to alienate as many people. And then also to think, I mean, I remember one of my one of my pastors in the past used to say that if your church is the only church
mm,
that is supposed to be saving the souls of everyone on this planet, then you got a lot of work to do. Seeing where we can work together,
yeah,
it makes it a bigger fight.
yeah,
Norris Henderson says, cuts, you get this system, you got to kill it with what is it, 1,000 cuts, death by
yeah,
1,000 cuts,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so we just a little slasher right here doing our part, right?
Well, one of the things I share with people, and I talk about even with a kid, a little kid, a little child with a toy, you know, when you try to take that toy away from that child. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've ever had any experience like that, but you try to pull that toy away from that child, and they're grabbing onto that toy for dear life and screaming at the top of their lungs and crying, and man, I mean, it is just traumatic, right? And I learned when I was young, and I used to babysit my nephews and nieces. What I learned was the best way to get a toy out of a child's hands is to put something else in its place.
Come
And
on.
once that child puts that toy down and grab the other toy, then you easily could just pick up that toy, and it's not even a fuss, right?
Hmm.
All right. But when you're trying to just snatch something away from someone, and so sometimes I'm like even cautious even with, and I know it might come out from here and there, but even like when you talk about, attacking this system, right? And or the word attack, right? Rather than, me saying I'm attacking or I'm trying to take something away, is that the alternative is that I'm creating something new and different. All right.
Amen.
I'm creating right? I want to create a solution, want to come to a solution, and want to offer up something that people can actually take a
Yeah.
hold. And when
Yeah.
they take a hold of that, they're done with the old, and you're able to move that out the way. And so,
Amen. That's fresh.
yep, how do
Hmm.
we create these moments, the type of environment that would allow for us to create together and have someone put their thing down
Yep.
and pick up the new thing that they was a part of creating.
Oh man, is that
You
the
know,
trick, right?
that's the word for the
That's
season, Desmond.
they're gonna
That's
be
the
put it
word
down.
for the season. Let me tell you, I'm going to a women's retreat at the
And
end
I'm
of
not even sending an
April.
invoice for that.
Put it on a shirt. I'm going to a women's retreat in April. It's a Christian retreat, and God gave this woman of God the theme of a new thing, that God is doing a new thing, right? And before I moved to Louisiana, one of my friends spoke that word over me, that God was wanting to do a new thing. And it was so amazing, because we know that there's nothing new under the sun. But what I told them was that what seems new to us is not new to God, right? So when you say about creating something new, that
Mhm.
is so in line with what I feel like is in this atmosphere. Because people say, well, we want to reform the system, whether the system is working the way that it was designed to work. So
Yeah,
what you say is so true. It's not that we need to attack it, or we need to create something new.
yeah,
Right? We need to create an alternative.
yeah.
I tell the people that I work with here about the fact that when we got into this, it wasn't enough to take people's, what I equate to that Hillary Clinton moment when they talk about her going and closing down all the coal mines, right? But what she didn't do was come back and say, what I have to offer you. So they were able to take
Yeah.
that and use that, right?
Matter of
So when
fact,
we talk about criminal,
she
go
should have
ahead.
led with that. That's the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah,
thing. She should have led with that.
she should have led with what I'm coming to give you. Yes.
Because even
Yeah.
when you talk about these prisons, when you look at the communities in which a lot of these prisons are in, right, they're the main source of employment,
Hmm.
in the economy, you know, and then so you have people in that community that depend on these prisons, right? And you talk about taking it away, you know they're going to get up in arms, right?
That's
Just
right.
like you
That's
would
right.
if somebody was talking about taking away the main source of income for your community, right?
That's right.
And so I think what's the best, and I just made this up. Trust me, I made it up. You're in this town. It's this old raggedy club that everybody go to,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
And I mean, it is. They don't. I mean, the food is horrible, right? But you try to shut that one club down in that in that city, you're going to catch hell, right?
You better know it.
You do is that you create a new club, right? And put the things in the club that you know the people would want, right? And you don't have to worry about shutting that club down, right? Those people are going to move, right from that old club to the new club, right?
That's right.
Guess what? When you go to condemn that building, ain't nobody even paying no mind to that.
No mind attention. Exactly.
You know,
Oh,
I could name all of those clubs in all the different towns that I lived in.
Oh, so you was a party animal.
So here's the trick, and this is where systems of oppression and systems of control have gained their dominance, right? Is that their system really benefits a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people in
Yeah,
power, right? But they've convinced so many more.
mhm.
And I can think of two really quick examples of this, right? You go back to the Civil War, and you had a bunch of rich slave owners convince poor white people that if they didn't fight for the Confederacy, that the slaves were going to come for what they had, right? There was actually no benefit for white,
yeah,
poor, non-slaving people, slave-owning people to fight for the Confederacy, and yet they did harder than anybody,
yeah,
right? You fast forward all the way to 2010 with Obamacare. And it was, we can't pass Obamacare because those people will get the health insurance that you think you're benefiting from right now, when
Mhm.
really the only people that are really, really benefiting are at the very, very top. So they've done a very good job at that. How do we convince that guy who works a horrible job at a
yeah,
prison with a rundown club and his wife probably turns over bed sheets in a hotel in a rundown town, that they're not benefiting from this.
No, it's not. It's not even telling them that they're not benefiting. See that? I think that is the wrong approach.
I'm already off on the route. I'm already off on the wrong
You're
foot.
off on the wrong track already, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, right? So, for instance, even with Amendment 4, right? We weren't our first contact or conversation with someone was not about what they weren't getting, right? It wasn't about that, right? I think it was completely different. I mean, we didn't talk about how messed up the clemency system was in Florida. That we didn't lead with that, right? We led with love, right? And it was a very simple question. You know, do you know someone who you love who's ever made a mistake? Right. We start with that, and so when you talk about that prison guard, right? I'm not trying to convince him how messed up of a situation he's in, right? And as a pretext for me wanting to shut that person down, what I will go to him with is the opportunity that he has to do much more than just be a prison guard.
Come on,
right? And so one of the things that when I was thinking about one of the things that ideas that was floating through my head, right, is how to, like, that prison camp in Louisiana, right? How to convince a major corporation, right, to come and take over that camp, right? Right? And offer jobs, right? Probably even more jobs to that community that pays even more money, right? Because a lot of these guards are making like maybe minimum wage or a little bit above minimum wage, right? A lot of these guards do not have a college education or anything like that. How do we create this ecosystem where, man, listen, you're going to get to go to school, get your degree, you're going to be able to get a job that pays almost twice as much as what you're making, and you don't have to worry about the danger, right?
Right.
Being, and you get to advance your career. I promise you that the overwhelming majority of prison guards is not sitting back at home daydreaming about being a prison guard. Prison guard is the choice that they are forced to take, and they're going to protect it with their life because they're in the mindset, this is all I got,
all I
can do. So I'm not even going to try to make it look bad, because to him, listen, his perspective is, man, this is the best thing going on right now. That it's not, it's going to fall on deaf ears, and he's going to look at you that, I don't like that outsider there. He's trying to hurt me, right? Even though you're saying some good stuff. But what I can do is present him, give him hope. But the key is, how are we actually engaging with them, right? And connecting them to the issue prior to trying to, say this is how we fix it. No, let's connect you first, right? And so we get people to connect with someone who they love, who made a mistake, and we connect to the emotion of forgiveness and redemption because they love someone. They feel that this guy should have a second chance, right? And we can talk about, well, in Florida, the person that you love would never get the right to vote back, or would have a hard time getting jobs or housing, and all that. And you get people to say, that's not right. And that's the key. How do you get people to say, that's not right? That's not fair. Those 3 words, that's it. How do we get them to say that? Once you get them to say that, they're yours.
I start with that's not right, and that's my problem.
And here's the thing too, Desmond, because we would be so remiss if we didn't bring you to that point where you're saying, okay, how are we spreading this love? What are some things that you can say? Is it just like, you know what, one day you just get up and you say, let's just get some people and we just gonna hit this street, we gonna hit these streets running, you know?
Sounds fun. It sounds fun.
What does that look like? Because I know that's and I engage in it myself. I know that's a lot of work
No,
behind the scenes. You know, that's a lot of prep, right?
that's a lot of work. That's a lot of,
Yeah.
but I think it's something deeper than that, right? And you listen. Dave already set the tone from the very beginning, right? That
Yeah.
you didn't bring me on this show to just scratch the surface.
No.
On this show to get deep. So
To
let me
dig down in there.
scratch the surface answers, right? What's important when you talk about hitting the streets? You ready for
Yeah.
this?
I'm ready.
Is having the courage to go places that you're not comfortable going.
Come on.
See, what a lot of people do when they hit the streets, they go to their comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they preaching to the choirs and all that kind of stuff. And that is, from campaigns all the way down. Yeah, I've seen campaigns where they spent a whole bunch of money to rent out an arena to bring a candidate there, and they invite all of the people who are already going to be voting for the candidate. Like, okay, and then complain when the other folks don't turn out to vote, which is kind of like, to me, insane. At the end of the day, if you really want to hit the streets, if you really, because here's the whole thing, what in my book, and that, I'm glad you said you can't discuss it too much, but I'm telling you, get my book.
Yeah.
Because in the book, there's a piece in there I talked about the Obama campaign, his first run for election, and I equated it to recovery, right? Talking about, how in recovery, we may consciously say that we want a good life, we want to live, but we end up doing destructive things and using drugs, and we end up, our actions are contrary to what we consciously say. And in the book, I talk about the reason that is because our conscious is in the minority, right? Our
Right.
subconscious, which is,
Mm-hmm.
like probably 90%
It's the
of
iceberg. Right.
it's the,
Yeah.
and while the conscious might say I want to live, your subconscious is saying I want to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to continue doing destructive things. Um, and so I talk about how your head is a democratic society, and there are
Mm-hmm.
folks who are thinking that you're not worth living, right? You're not worthy of having joy. How do we approach those people who say you're not worthy?
You're worthy.
And Obama did something similar. People were like, oh no, because remember he wasn't even the front runner. People were like,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, he's not qualified. He's this, he's not that, he's not that. And he went to those people. Because if he just hung around the people who supported him, he would not have grown his base, right? And he kept
Amen.
going until he got the majority and won the Democratic nomination. But here's the thing: in politics, this is thing called margin of error, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a 5-point swing. And so while you have 51%, something
Mm-hmm.
can happen to swing 3 or 5 votes, and the next thing you know, you're
Yep.
in the minority.
Yep.
And so, as in recovery, just because now you have the majority that is agreeing with you, that doesn't mean that you stop. You've got to continue building and continue going after those people who think that you're not going to be, because you want to build your margin of error so wide that if you have a breakup in a relationship, if you lose your job, if you have a death in the family and things of that nature, right? You won't lose so much votes that you will pick up a drink or a drug and
Yep.
relapse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is, when you talk about hitting the streets and going out, it's the same thing. Is that don't just go to people who you're comfortable with. The key
Exactly.
is to go into communities. When I got my first petition off the printing press, out of the copier, my first batch, you know where I went? I went to a conservative county. It was during the election,
Mm-hmm.
and I only approached people who wore T-shirts that indicated that they were supporting some Republican candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I went. And what a lot of people don't know is that part of the process of citizen initiative is collecting petitions, and
Yep.
you have to collect a certain amount of petitions in each congressional district, and you have to qualify a minimum amount of congressional districts. The first two congressional districts that were qualified, I think the first three, but definitely the first two, were all conservative districts, right?
Yes,
That's
indeed.
that set that tone, because if I can
Yeah.
go to the people who I'm uncomfortable going to
Yep.
and convince them that there's something right here, right? I could go on Fox News and talk to Tucker Carlson, and in spite of whatever he tried to do, his own fans is telling him to back the hell off
All
because
for you.
Yeah.
Amen.
right. And
That is.
so
Mhm.
do that by being courageous enough to talk to people that you're not familiar with.
Where else
Right?
can we do this? Because you said two things that I know you're working on, and I want you to share with people. There is the right to restore, voting rights, but there are two things I think that are also very personal for you too, around housing and employment. Can you still not get a mortgage because of you're a returning person?
Listen, I am still like, well, it became a lot easier because I have my civil rights restored. However,
Yep.
even with your civil rights restored, there still remains remnants of barriers to being able to get housing, right? Because
Little boxes at the
people,
bottom of applications.
what- and even if you don't have the box, these folks might run a credit check, and on your credit report, it will show up that you've been convicted, right? And so I remember running into this lady that went to buy. She bought the house, but she couldn't close on the house because she couldn't get insured on the house. No one would insure her because she had a conviction. And so I was like, I naturally just assumed, right? I said, "So what? You was convicted of arson or something?"
Mhm.
Like she was like, "Nah, she was just convicted of drug possession,
Mhm.
right?" I just automatically assume, okay, well, insurance agent or company would not insure
Yeah,
someone because okay, they had a history of burning down homes
you're right.
or insurance fraud.
Seems
All right,
reasonable.
yeah, that's reasonable. But no, she had a simple drug conviction, and so yeah, so those barriers still remain. Um, it's been a little bit easier because not too less than a year. It's been less than a year since I've had my civil rights restored,
Yeah.
and so it makes it a lot easier. But there's still challenges that's there. You know, I'm now, because I got my civil rights restored, I can now take the bar, sit for the Florida bar.
Yes. Yes.
Because in the past, couldn't, because when a certain occupational licenses
Right.
require,
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
restoration of your civil rights. Um, and then the other piece is gun ownership,
Yeah.
right? I'm just keeping it real, and I know people are all over the place with gun ownership, but at the end of the day, you know, I should be able to
Mhm.
have a gun in my home, right? I should be able to have my family protected. My wife should be able to have a gun to protect herself, right? And if somebody comes in our home, any one of us should be able to protect our home. All right. But because of a felony conviction,
Yep.
I don't have the right to own a gun. And so that is something that is that's also I believe important. Well,
So there's the same dynamic there, right? With the I don't want those people moving into my neighborhood for housing, or I don't want those people working in my workplace if it's the box on an application. Same dynamic. How do you come to a place of love? Is it the same place of love? Is it, do you know someone who's made a mistake?
oh no, listen, there you go. Because
I'm
you
getting
said
it. I'm getting
first.
it. I'm getting
Listen, listen, anybody is going to say, I don't want those
it.
people,
Yep. Yep.
right? It's so easy for us to say, yeah, I don't want, you ask a woman, with kids,
Yep.
you want a sex offender
Right.
living next to you? Oh, I don't want those people. I mean, come on.
Right.
And
Right.
so it is. So one of the things, and I talk to people about narratives and the power of narratives, and what
Mhm.
the thing that narrative does, some narratives, not all, but in particular around criminal crime and criminal justice, and that's why our words are so important. is that narratives around that end up doing two things. They dehumanize people and desensitize us to their humanity. And
Mm-hmm.
so when that happens, those people I don't want in my community, right? But when you here, 'cause let me tell you, you want to talk about juvenile justice reform, right? I had this conservative guy approach me and like, well, Desmond, man, listen, I love what you're saying. So I need some help here. What are your suggestions around juvenile justice reform? And I
Come on.
told him, like, listen, I am not an expert. That is not my area of expertise. But let me tell you a place that you can start, right? Imagine your son getting in trouble at school. How would you want him to be treated?
There you go.
That's your starting point. Now, that is
Mm-hmm.
where you start from. And when people make policies or laws based on how they would want their loved ones to be treated, we're in a much better space. You feel what I'm saying?
Oh
Much.
yeah.
Yeah.
The key though is taking it from those people
Yep.
to someone who you love.
Yep.
So what do you want happen to your son when he's released? Do you want him to not be able to get a job even 10 years after he's been released?
Have a
Right?
place to live.
Yep. Do you want him to not
Yeah.
have a place to live? And how are we creating those type of questions, right? After we've connected the person or brought them into proximity of the issue, right? You do that, right? And let me tell you, I've seen this mistake over and over and over and over again, right? I've seen so many movements get so caught up in their head about how things should be done
Mm-hmm.
that the drumbeat in their head drowns out everything else,
Everything else. Yeah.
right? And they're marching forward and they're steamrolling over things until they run into that one wall that
Hmm.
just, you know, and what happens is the people around them lose even more hope because
Yeah.
their tactics were flawed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they didn't
Yeah.
really connect with the grassroots like they said that they were representing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they get caught up in catchy phrases and not being able to defend those phrases, and or have what they do, they take over the phrase. I can't remember the word. Co-op,
Yeah.
They
co-op,
co-opted. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
We
now
know those phrases.
okay, and so I think what is like so vitally important is that you understand. Like I always said, don't have a monopoly on the pain, don't have a monopoly on the
Nothing
solution.
on the solution.
Please
Right.
you do not know everything. And even these thoughts that I'm sharing with you all today, I'm not saying that's the only way that you
Right.
know, and if you do anything else, you know, out of whatever, out of your mind. But what I am saying, as a person who has managed to win the most controversial issue in the most controversial state during the most controversial time, and to do it in the fashion that we were able to do it, and having it lead with love without attacking anyone, without having any endorsed politicians endorse it. We did things differently, and we were very successful with it. Right, as a person that led that, these are some of the lessons that I've learned. Right, that I think can be applied in a lot of places.
Well, they will be applied to this place. I can assure you of that, Desmond, because it makes a lot of sense, right? And it's good to know that, as we are walking through what I feel, and hopefully I'm not going to be right about this, but what we pass on and how we train those that are going to come after us,
Mm,
right? To pick up this gauntlet and to move this forward, is that they're going to be moving in that vein. No longer are, that it's us against them, but let me see your humanity and how we connect, right? How would you want to be treated in this situation? How can we come together and build something that's going to be? Because I tell people all the time, the majority of us really just want to live
Hmm.
peacefully
Say it again.
and
Say it again.
honestly
Hmm.
together
It's not.
in this world.
Let me tell you something. It's not us against them.
No.
Understand this, right? Because let me tell you, and I look at this, all of this, in such an esoterical way, right?
Right.
And matter of fact, let me see if I'm gonna run through this right just to show you something, right? It's about us being a part of this body, right? And
Oh
what you
yeah.
find is that the body don't necessarily fight against itself. It's not
Mm-mm.
arm against leg or whatever. And I equate that even to talking about, like I said, we had a great opportunity to talk about this, even like say Black Lives Matter, right?
Yep.
When you hear Black Lives Matter, and so many people have just like pushed back against that and all, And at the end of the day, what was people really trying to say? Well, guess what? I'm not going to be on this show and trying to impose my will on other people and try to speak for them. But let me tell you what I thought about and what I embraced when I hear Black Lives Matter, right? I see us all living in this country as part of body.
Amen.
We're one body, right? And when I look at I know that if I'm jogging somewhere and I twist my ankle, right? My ankle sends a signal to my brain
Mm-hmm.
that something is wrong down there. And my entire body responds to that right
Yeah.
there, right? But when I twist my ankle and my ankle says, hey, something is wrong down here, you don't see the elbow saying, but I matter too, or the eye
Right.
saying, I matter too. None of that happens. And
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter was nothing, what I look at it as was nothing but a part of the body
Yeah.
that's sending
Yeah.
a signal to the brain and saying, listen, there's some trauma that's happening down here that
Yeah.
needs attention, right? And
Amen.
it's not to say that I am better than the elbow. Matter of fact, there's not even a discussion about that.
Yep.
Well, this is what
Mm-hmm.
we do know, that if we don't attend to that trauma, then the other parts of the body will eventually get affected.
Yep.
You better come on now. You
The
better
back,
teach.
everything. And just like if we don't take care of those who are weakest among us in our community, we're going to end up feeling the brunt of that. And so, how
Amen.
do we create this understanding that it's not about your side against my side? It's not about us against them, right? It's about one body that knows that we need each other to survive,
Come on.
be as effective and powerful as possible. And so, what our body does is what we should be doing as a community.
Absolutely.
Is that
Mm-hmm.
if there's a cry for help, right? That's saying that there's trauma somewhere, we immediately respond, right, to that trauma and understand that we must fix or heal that trauma for us to get back to functioning the way we need to function, right? And not
Amen.
ignore that trauma or try to trivialize that trauma or try to redirect the attention
Yep.
that the trauma needs to other parts of the body that don't need that attention right now.
Come on.
Full
That's
body
right.
cast, right? Full body cast for a broken ankle, right?
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's about how do we come together as a community to heal that,
He-
right? As a nation, as a country, right? But the key is having people understand that we're all a part of the same fabric,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all a part of that same fabric, right? And when we can do that, not let these politicians or these special interests
Yep.
that benefits off
Yep.
of the division
Yep.
to use us as puppets, and we have to watch our languages, right? When we're able to shift that narrative, man, let me tell you, everybody know that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Yep.
That's right.
Everybody knows that.
Yep.
And
yet,
what? That applies to our community, our country, right?
Yeah.
The greatness of our country is intimately tied to how much weight the segments of our society that has been the most weakened by various systems can handle.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yep.
Right? And if we want to become stronger, our community, our state, our country, then the only way that that happens, right, is by strengthening the weakest link.
That's it.
Not by weakening the weakest link,
no.
because when we weaken the weakest link, then we can even handle even less.
Mm-hmm.
So before we run over our time, Linda and I want to try something new with you. We want to end with rapid fire. I got 3 prompts for you. You ready?
Okay.
What's the first moment you can remember where you confronted a system of oppression?
Ha!
Not what's your favorite ice cream.
The first moment was when I was living in Aurora, Illinois. I went to the gym to shoot some baskets, and the gym was closing. It was snowing and cold outside, and the security guard would not let me wait in the lobby area for my parents to pick me up, and he made me.
Wow.
How old were you?
That was the first. I was middle school age, right?
Wow.
And ready? The security guard was African American.
Yeah.
Second one is there ought to be a law. Now we're talking to a person who literally made a law, but if there was anything, there ought to be a law. It's all
there ought to be a law that mandates that governments are driven by creating a more inclusive democracy.
Come on.
I love it.
Drop the mic.
And the last one is a tiny bit self-serving for us, but also for our listenership of where they need to go next to educate themselves. Who do you know? Who should people know?
I want to say they should know Desmond.
Amen. That's what came to your heart. That's what came to your head.
Man, they better. Yeah.
And if you don't, you better.
I will agree with that.
I'm okay with that answer. I am okay with that.
And I'm going to make sure they know Desmond. Can I say that without hurting anybody's feelings? I just want to say again how absolutely, and I don't want this to sound condescending or disingenuous in any way, but how proud I am of you, you know, as a Black woman, as a Black mother, as a sister, as a fellow human being on this earth, right? I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of the work that you do. I'm very proud of your platform and what you stand for and how you are seeking to bring so many people together. And I stand with you in solidarity because that's where my heart lies too. I call myself, and this is, you know, a little crazy, but I call myself the white person whisperer because I have this uncanny knack, and I know it's God-given, that whenever I'm in a situation, my white brothers and sisters gravitate towards me. And most of the time they are from those different walks. Yeah. And when we leave each other, there has been an exchange, and a deposit. And so I understand exactly where you are coming from, and you empower me. What you've accomplished empowers me here to know that that's the way to go, that I'm on the right track with that. Mm-hmm. And I just appreciate you giving your time, honey. I appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with us for a little while. You're so busy, and it's so gracious of you to do that. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy speaking with you all. I mean, this was probably one of my best interviews in quite some time. And so I really appreciate that.
Desmond Meade is a MacArthur Genius Grant Fellow, one of the top 100 most influential people, and led the successful effort through Amendment 4 in Florida to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated people.